Hey everybody, it's Yoli Chisholm, and it's my objective to change your perspective. And today I thought I would take the time to answer a question that I got this week that is actually very common amongst minorities. So I'll read the question. Basically, it says, I'm the only black person on my project team, and somehow I feel that I am increasingly being undermined. No matter how much work I put in, I always feel the disrespect and disregard for my opinions and actions. How do you navigate around this without pissing off the partners on the project who are the architects of the problem? I'm sure a lot of you will be able to resonate with this feeling and this particular situation and scenario. It's really a layered problem, and all I can give you is kind of my perspective. I've been in the workforce 20 years, and I've always been working for either small startups or big corporations. And I will tell you, I have over time, through some very sort of hard lessons, developed my own personal approach and philosophy when it comes to dealing with situations like this. So I will tell you, 20 years in, I will tell you that one of the things that I really like about working for a corporation is that it is very transactional. That might be counterintuitive to the sort of narrative that's out there, but I actually like to know where I stand. 1 + 1 = 2. I put in work, I'm fairly compensated, I'm learning, I'm developing, I'm growing. If you happen to be in that kind of environment, that's sort of the first checklist you should be doing. Is this a company that you want to be working for? Hopefully when you went in, you were actually interviewing them versus them interviewing you. And do you feel you're going to be able to learn? Will you be able to get out of this and come out of this company smarter than when you went in? That's sort of the first check. And then the most important relationship you have is obviously a relationship with your manager. They kind of control your destiny within the company and really control your career development. So if the person you're having the issue with is your manager, then you really have to very quickly decide, if you like the company and if you see that there's opportunity to grow within the company, then you're going to have to sort of address the issue directly. But I will tell you that I have learned over time not to make the leap to discrimination or racism first. It is sort of the last thing on the list. And I'll tell you why. I have this model that I think of that is really called sort of the spheres of control. And we all sort of have 3 spheres of control. We have the things that we control directly. When you're in the workforce, you control your work, the quality of your own work. You control how you communicate. You control how you work with others. So that's your direct sphere of control. And then there's a second sphere where it's the area that you don't control, but you can influence. And so that usually is, how you work in teams, when you speak up your ideas and how you add value, and whether or not you're listened to. And so I heard some of that in your question. And then the third sphere is areas you do not control and the areas you cannot influence. And so I have very quickly learned that if I get a sense of racism or discrimination, it's really on me to make a quick decision as to whether I'm in or out of there, because I don't play around with my career. And racist and racism is in that sphere that I neither can control or influence. I didn't come into the workforce to make racists no longer be racists. And so I make a decision about the kinds of companies that I want to work for, and I look for values that match mine. And so if you feel you have the time to sort of change somebody's opinion in that sphere, I good luck with that, and please let us know what the magic bullet is. But I also understand that sometimes it is not as easy to just simply up and leave and change your job. I will say that it's the best time to look for a job is when you have a job. So if that's what you believe is happening, then I would really encourage you to make your decision very quickly and swiftly so that you can get your career back on the right trajectory. Now, I will say, if you've done all those checks and you're like, listen, I want to stay in this company, I want to figure out how to solve this problem. One of the things you always have to sort of start with is kind of doing a self-check. So, one of your biggest strengths as you grow in the workforce is going to be self-awareness and your emotional intelligence. People who have a high emotional intelligence, and one of those components is self-awareness, are really able to go farther than even people who might have a higher IQ, have an MBA, have all a fantastic network. But if you have emotional intelligence, it really gives you the skills you need to navigate these kinds of issues, because really when you're in the workforce, it's really all about relationships, and you're really playing the long game. And so one of the things that really helped me very early in my career when I was working at eBay is they made all of us do the Myers-Briggs personality test. A lot of people think those things are kind of fluffy, but I found it to be a very useful tool. And what I found early in my career is that I was an ENTJ, which is a lot of leadership and a lot of leadership skills, very assertive. And being aware of that early in my career helped me, because my ambitions didn't match my skill sets at the time, right? If I knew that I was somebody who wants to be the leader, but I'm still at the stage where I've got to learn, it gave me that discernment to really be self-aware, understand who else I'm working with, what it's going to take to really get their confidence, build a repertoire of work and successes that actually builds the reputation to earn the respect. And so, whereas as a young person, I may have been like, I'm here, I'm straight out of school, I've got great ideas, and I'm ready to lead. Sometimes, you've got to really check yourself. And so it's not only knowing the what to do, but it's really the how. And I will say, it has not always been easy. It has been something that you have to craft. But I will say, taking the Myers-Briggs test not only helped with self-awareness of myself, but it also helped in understanding other people's work styles. So I'll give you an example. I had a situation where I was working at this high-profile tech company, just joined the company, and had a colleague who I definitely felt had it out for me. Always on my case, disrespecting my opinions, dismissing my views. At least that was the perception I had. And we also did a similar test within this particular org, and it turned out that this woman's work style was that she preferred she could not sort of operate outside of sort of very detailed, very prescriptive interactions. So whereas I tend to be somebody who's got vision, who likes to talk about big picture, big ideas. Let's brainstorm. Let's not worry about very tactics at this time. Let's not worry about the analytics and the data at this time. Whereas she was very much the opposite. She's like, okay, how are we going to do it? What are all the risks? What are all... And so you need all those personality types within an organization. And those tend to be very different work styles. And so being self-aware and being aware of others' work styles helps you understand how you need to approach that particular person. And I actually found that changing my work style in my interactions with this particular person actually changed the dynamics of the relationship. And so I only bring this up to say that sometimes before you make the leap to the dark side, that it may actually be that your work styles are clashing. They want to see the details, or maybe you're the opposite. You are always asking for the details and they're thinking big picture, or they just have a different work style. Now, there's tons of personality tests out there. I would really encourage you. I don't think it's fluffy. I think it can be very helpful in terms of providing guidance into some of the things you should be thinking about. And so it's really not just that you know what you're doing, but you also want to think about the how. I have found over the course of my career that your communication style and being an effective communicator is another strength and another muscle that you really need to work. And also, like I said, when you're in the workforce, it really is about the long game. I have been in situations where people end up reporting to people that they hired, or end up going to another company and end up being managed by somebody that was their peer. And so you really have to think about relationships. And the final sort of framework that I will also use is that when you're interacting with people, your goal should be to determine how can you both leave this interaction winning. So how can it be a win-win for both of you? And so that really requires you to understand what are their goals and what are their objectives. What does success look like for them in this project? What does it look like for you? What is that? Is there a scenario where you can have you understand what their priorities are and what your priorities are, and you're able to communicate those effectively? And is there a scenario where you both win? So I think starting off from what is best for the project, right? Are you both making decisions that ensure that they get what they want and you get what you need in order for the project to be successful? And I've learned over time to take your personal out of it. It is hard. We're human beings, right? It is hard, but I have learned not to take, things personally. I'm here to work, and I'm lucky enough to be in a field that I actually love and I'm good at. And if you have decided, no, this is a company I want to grow with, I'd really encourage you first to do that self-check. Understand, is it a case of different work styles? Understand, is it a case of how you are both communicating? Understand, are you ensuring that you're both getting a win-win out of this situation? And are you too early in the game to have earned that respect? Now, you want to make sure you're coming into a company where the culture of respect, mutual respect, is there. But also just understand that you're not in the scenario where I was, and I was just ready to take over and control because that's my work style. And you have to learn to temper that and really think about, you know, your career is a long sort of project, and you are building your reputation over time. And really, it's the work that you do that is the currency that allows you to kind of have these transactions with others. Now, having said all of that, if you really truly believe you are in a scenario where you are being discriminated against, I will tell you my personal view. I have rarely found scenarios where it's worth it to cry racism, because I really, that is my personal choices. I pick my battles, and in the work environment, it's not one of those areas where I'm fighting the battle against racism. I've been lucky to work for companies where there are anti-discrimination policies, and there are sort of diversity and inclusion policies that are real, not just walking, not just talking the talk, and have always selected managers. Keyword, you are doing the selection of the manager that you feel you're going to be able to work and grow with and learn from. And so I would put your work choices the same way you select a mate, the same way you select a doctor, the same way you select your school. It deserves that same weight. And so and I just do not choose to stay in environments where I believe there's blatant racism. There is no sort of single silver bullet answer. You decide whether this is a company you want to grow with. Escalating it to your boss is always a touchy situation, right? I would say use your discretion. But escalating it to HR, I would say use your discretion. HR, I believe, represents the company. And so as long as the company doesn't espouse discriminatory views, then you will probably be in a decent position. So I do want to say, the last thing I will say is, sometimes things aren't, it's really not about overthinking a scenario. So if you think about your career like an asset, like a house, if you've got your house in a neighborhood where people are throwing garbage on your yard, ruining your reputation, writing graffiti on your walls, you got to keep on, troubleshooting behind them, and, explaining and clearing up your reputation. You think about your career that way. If you're in an environment where you have to keep on watching to see who is putting a knife in your back, backstabbing you to the neighbors, you need to get out of that neighborhood. It's sometimes there isn't, after everything I have said, it's really not, we are all very simple people, and sometimes situations really just are what they are. And so treat your career like a precious, precious asset, and time is not to be wasted. If you're not going to be able to leave there with a great reference, if you're not going to be able to leave there with a great reputation and people you can maintain lifelong um, uh, um, connections with, you need to leave now. But if it's a company you believe you can grow with, then the best thing you can do is work on yourself and mature some of those EQ skills that I talked about. And you will skyrocket past any of the haters and people who think that they're ruining your career in the short term. I've seen it happen time and time again. People who look like they're winning in the short term, and 10 years pass, and boy, you can basically look back and see how far you've come. And so sometimes it's not worth it to overthink it. Sometimes it is what you think it is, and you've got to make a decision. You're not going to change an entire corporation. It's certainly not on you to do that. And so I would say make your choices accordingly. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. If you go back and listen to everything I've just said, you will notice that there is one central theme throughout, and that is control. And if you use none of the advice that I've given you, except to understand that your career is not something that happens to you, you are in control of it. Do not be passive and just let life and your career happen to you. You can make choices. You can choose to stay, you cannot. You can choose to change, you cannot. You can choose to interact a certain way, or you cannot. And, it may come off that I have either a flippant or a very sort of privileged point of view, but I will tell you that I have a certain perspective. I bring to my life choices a certain perspective, and that perspective is that my grandfather, my grandmother, my great-grandparents, who were actually able to educate themselves. My grandfather was one of the first in South Africa to receive a BA and went on to become a lawyer during apartheid. And so regardless of where you're from, your circumstances, there are those who have come before us that have dealt with worse. And so dealing with a jerk in the workplace is child's play. And you are absolutely in control of where you choose to be. But that's just my opinion. Like I said, it's my objective to change your perspective. Have an awesome weekend.